Yeah, so this is our first time at this conference, and you don't know how to read the room, so we could have gone a lot more kind of amusing with this one. It's fairly toned down, so depending on sort of the reactions we get, maybe we'll get a little bit more feisty through it.
But no active booing or hissing, though, please. Only encouraging noises.
Yeah, exactly. So 3 years ago, I was on a train to Bristol. Well, sorry, I was at Bristol Temple Meads on a train to Manchester. And I was sat pretty much with that view. Obviously, I just Googled that. I didn't take that 3 years ago and keep it on my phone for this. But I was sat there, and it felt like a 4-hour journey to the headmaster's office because we were going to see a client of ours. And it was just a bit... I knew it, and they knew it. And I kind of knew that this 4-hour trip I was going on was probably the last time I'd be taking that trip to go and see this client. And it was a bit like, is it me, is it them? And it turns out it's definitely them. No, it's definitely both of us. And I was trying to think, like, how did it get like this? Because, like, we won it. And everyone, you know, we did the classic agency thing. We won, we had champagne, we had pizza, we went out with the client. It was like, yay! It was this, we love each other. This is going to be awesome. And then sort of a year went past, 2 years went past, and it had gone from that, yay, to this, like, And it's like, what is going on? Why are we spending all of our time getting frustrated? Why are we spending our time like... I was thinking, what is it we do for these guys? And I couldn't get past the amount of things we did just to tell them what it was we were doing. Like, oh, I do a weekly status report and a status call. And then I do like a fortnightly RAG report as well. And like they take up all these meetings. And then we'll have a meeting just to check that the other meetings are taking place and everything's working out. And I thought, you know, like if I was the client, I'd be like, this is dull. What is going on? So we were thinking, like, why is it that this happens? So kind of agencies on the left-hand side here, like, yeah, we are feeling a bit less valued. Right, you know, you guys, I mean, how many people are brand side in the room if you put your hand up? So almost all of you. Right, I tell you what, try standing on this stage and being an agency and being told to do more for less constantly. And then going to your boss and being like, yeah, they want more for less again. And the thing is, they keep having a go at us because what we're doing is getting increasingly shitter. So, like, how do we deal with that? Like, how do we move our mindset? What do we do? So I'm sure if any of these, for you guys on the right, do any of those ring a bell from the agency relationships you've had in your past? But, you know, as an agency, we're the most expensive employee you've got, pretty much, right? So it's in both of our interests to make this better, you know, not being mad men to sad men. You know, that's kind of where that relationship had gone to.
Yeah, and I've got a slightly different tale of woe, but it is a tale of woe. So this was me and a colleague for about 3 months, and the mission we had was to do something that relatively should have been quite straightforward. It was people who bought cars, trying to keep them interested in that purchase because there was a long tail in to actually delivering and receiving their vehicle. And the premise was, let's just make the experience a bit more joined up across web, social, display, and email. Pretty simple. I mean, we have sent people to the moon, allegedly. We do lots of complicated stuff on a daily basis, and yet this was a complete pain in the backside. And in fact, it was a bit of an unmitigated car crash, and that's a bad analogy to use, given it was an automotive client, but it was terrible. And it was terrible because what we actually delivered was slightly better, more personalised email and a couple of pages that were a bit more dynamic and relevant. And the reason it became from that big idea of the entirety of their experience post-purchase being unified, harmonised, and made relevant was not because the idea was bad, it is just because it was really, really, really hard to do. And some of the things that we struggled with were these types of issues, really. So firstly, authority was a big problem for us. The client that we worked with was part of a global organisation, and that global organisation had taken core technologies at a global level, and they had no clout. They could not influence the roadmap, they could not influence the work being done. And it's the only time I've ever seen a technology provider who was actually effectively an employee, you know, they're contracted by the clients to do work, say, no, we're not going to do that. We don't care what that does to customer experience. So we had a lack of authority in the team. We also had proper language barriers. So we had creatives, we had data scientists, we had technologists, we had people with really creative, fluffy ideas about how things could be awesome. They all spoke really different languages, and they were from different agencies. And that was a complete challenge to manage because there's a competitive dialogue there, and there is trying to work collaboratively for the client. The other one was this ownership piece. The client gave us a brief and walked off. They stopped being engaged. They expected the agencies to work well and play well together, and it just didn't happen. And the thing you can summarise this up, it's complex. It's complex because there is an ownership of website in one part of the business, there's ownership of email in another part of the business, there's an ownership of the product and the experience people are having that product in another level of the business. And there was just that complexity that existed. And this really has been the sort of key theme and problem that we've seen going forward. And I guess this is what we're in the market to do, isn't it, Rob? Really?
Yeah,
This is what we're trying to do. Reimagine.
In theory, our job is quite cool, right? Because we get to reimagine products for people in the world around us, and we get to influence experiences, perceptions. We get to think about how I interact with my brand or how with your brands. But it kind of occurred to me that as an agency, what we hadn't really done was take stock of where the market had gone, and actually think, is the way we engage with our customers at the moment the right way? Are we even structured in the right way to do that? So it did kind of lead to an element of soul searching, and this is a little bit of a personal therapy session talking about it now. And it's happening around us. So I discovered this quote fortuitously because I was writing this presentation the other day from Forrester, but it kind of it influences and I guess points to the direction of what we're talking about here, which is as the lines between advertising, marketing and customer experience blur, so do the capabilities and infrastructure required to support them. Like if you look at the vendors outside, there's all sorts of different people, but they're all using similar language. That word customer experience is everywhere, but people work differently. So how do we react and how do we design systems to be able to support this activity? So we did a bit of research and thought, I'm not sure any of the major models are right at the moment. So we looked at big consulting and worked out kind of how they were structured, and we talked to some clients that had relationships with some of those guys. We thought, well, that's not us. I don't think that's going to get kind of traction with the type of client we're looking for. We looked at the big agency networks, the likes of Group M, MediaCom, who we've got really good, close relationships with. And again, it was like, for the work that we want to do and the success we want to have, that was not quite right. And then the specialist boutiques, which can, they can find some of the best people, and there's tons of them outside there. I hope if you've spoken to some of the vendors, there's some really great stuff going on out there. But again, there's very vertical discipline, and it's how do we do this? So we tackle the problem that Gary mentioned, which is a single project can touch multiple types of people, use multiple types of language, and touch multiple types of teams. So we did the thing which agencies are typically terrified of doing, which is ask our clients what they thought about us and what they wanted more of. So it could be boiled down to roughly these 5 statements here: ease, speed, clarity, innovation, and value. So that seems pretty fundamental. I mean, I don't know if any of it, well, raise your hand if you've ever thought, I'm going to choose this product or agency because they're not that easy to work with. They're quite slow. They're expensive. And they still do what they did 10 years ago. Like, it's obvious, right? As agencies and clients, and if you guys are creating products, you need to have all of these things. So why don't we interact and work together to do that?
I think this is a good picture. So I am a techie, hands up, that's my confession. And this is just one good lens of why that isn't quite as easy to do. It is fundamental and it is the sort of basics that we should be delivering, but it's hard because it's complex. And this is just one lens. If you follow anything to do with technology and marketing, you'll have seen this image. It's not our image. It's a guy called Scott Brinker, chiefmartech.com. Really talented guy, knowledgeable about how technology is influencing the role of marketing going forward. And we have stolen a lot of his content when we talk about some of the recommendations we're going to be making. But key thing here is this is the technology landscape for marketing. So this is basically technologies that are there to help marketers do their job better. 2011, 150 vendors. Now in 2018, allegedly 5,000. It was actually around about 7,500 to 8,000 vendors. That is just one lens on why the world has become more complicated, because there's thousands and thousands of vendors offering solutions to problems that marketers are facing day to day. That's an indication of just the complexity that we have to deal with day to day in engaging with consumers across all of their experiences. And doing that in a way which is relevant and engaging so that they don't go and complain about the experience they have because that damages our brand. That's fundamentally the challenge. So this is just one lens to try and show how complexity has grown almost exponentially and how it will continue to grow going forward. And so the challenge remains, which is if the fundamentals are there and they're key, and it's always going to be complicated, what do we do about it? So this is another couple of little views on the same sort of problem. So this is the potential of technology capability increasing in terms of the ability that it offers brands to use it to deliver great stuff to consumers. And this is businesses. We sort of change a bit slower. We've got people, we've got processes to manage, we've got ways to work. And so how do you manage this dichotomy between the two? Complexity increasing, but actually organisations being reasonably slow to change. So the way that we have begun to think of it really in trying to reimagine the relationship that we have with our clients and how we work internally is about not trying to fight the fact that things are complex. It's going to be complex. It's going to continue to be complex going forward. But if we architect our ways of working, and if we actually understand that the world is going to continue to be complex, then we can hopefully make the steepness of that curve a little bit less. So that's our goal, is simply to try and make the complex a bit easier to manage. And so we've looked at that across the sort of three classic dimensions of what can we do with how we work as people, what can we do with the processes that we use to engage with our clients, and then as a final consideration, what does that mean for the technologies that we offer our clients and we use to build part of our proposition? And we deliberately think of it in that order as well. And these are just a few things that we've tried to do, and we're still trying to do, I think, day to day, to make things better. So first one for Rob on people.
Yeah, so my belief, and this is where I'm the strategy one and Gary's the tech strategist, so my belief always starts with the people, and to be fair, so does yours.
Yeah.
But I think it's fundamental how we as agencies and you guys as clients and us together as a relationship structure our teams is going to define whether or not we're successful in the future. Because if we get it right, we're going to be able to have some positive responses to some of the statements on the right-hand side. You know, we need to be efficient in everything we do. It came through clearly. You guys hate it when we are slow and inefficient, and as you should do. But there has to be some give and take on there. We have to think, actually, sometimes it's you guys that cause us the issues, and we need to be braver about bringing that up. So how we structure people, how we ensure that ideas are able to surface, and able to surface in a way which allows that positive progression and regular updates is really critical. So we call our client teams that we create now a little connective. And funnily enough, we've actually got a client who we pitched to, and this is one of the first clients, actually not the first, but one of the first that we kind of operated this model in. I didn't know Pierluigi was going to be here, so he's now sat in the front looking at me. So
just nod sagely.
So as long as you don't disagree with me, then I've got away with it.
Yeah.
So we like to maintain the disciplines and the deep specialisms that you buy, because when you work with an agency, you're doing it because the expertise resides outside of your organisation, typically. So we can't let that get away. But what we have to do is break down those barriers of language. You have to break down the barriers of data transfer. We have to make sure that ideas are secure and data are secure. So our idea is these connective specialists which are brought together by strategic generalists. Now, this isn't unique. This is not a unique idea. You see this in various different businesses around the world. But it's very rare in our experience that we as agencies have deployed this sort of model with our clients. And crucially, we have the client in this team here. So the client becomes part of this co-located. It can be co-located or it could be kind of co-headspace. We are working together. And we've also kind of switched how we think about the role of ideas and the role of design. So for us, design isn't necessarily something that a creative person does to produce a piece of brand imagery, for example. Design is how we structure a piece of data science, or it's how we create a customer journey. It's how we look at the pivotal moments in a consumer's life. We work that through. But we've now brought design right up to the start of that process, essentially stealing ideas from a lot of software methodologies where we are rapidly iterating what we do, and we put in that creative thought at the beginning and asking them to challenge things so that we do actually do things differently. Because the risk is otherwise you do what you've always done before and then present it back and get some criticism, and then you go away and you try and react again. Actually, we try and do the reacting up front to try and make that, so at least for you guys, when you come and work with us, it feels a little bit different. Because otherwise, what is our point of difference as an agency? There'll be lots of agencies that do the 4 specials we had up there. We have to change the way we work.
Yeah, and I think just building upon that design piece. So this is not the definitive answer. This is just an example of one of the techniques we've started to use. It's not our technique, again. So this is basically Google Design Ventures Sprint. So the basic premise of this is it's a 5-day activity. And it's formed around a challenge or a brief that you have to answer. Yeah, and it needs to be a quite well-articulated challenge, a problem that's causing you pain on a daily basis. You commit in that 5-day period a team of cross-functional roles. They could be data scientists, it could be creative, it could be technologists, it could be strategists, whatever the right mix of people that you believe are necessary to answer the challenge that you have. And then crucially, you commit their time for that 5-day period full-time to dealing with that problem and that problem statement. And it follows the sort of classic model of sort of diverge to consider all the possible solutions and then converge on the right solution for you. Build it as quickly as you can and test to see whether or not that delivers anything of value back to your organisation. This is really hard to do because the first few times you do it, it will be a bit of a car crash because people aren't necessarily used to working that way. That's what we found, certainly in our teams. And so the key thing is map the problem, sketch the solution, so you're still at the why point there, pitch them competitively in the nature of that team in terms of picking the best solution to back, prototype it so you can demonstrate something, and then get it in front of the person who you're trying to impress, and do that in a 5-day period. So it is that converge, there's a diverge, converge, test it, get feedback as quickly as possible. And it doesn't have to be something that you build. It doesn't have to be a piece of tech. It could be a strategy on a page, for example. The benefit we found from this, though, this is not a definitive way in which we work. This is just one of the tricks of the trade that we're trying to instill in ourselves. The benefit is, yes, you get something quicker and you get feedback a bit more rapidly. But the cultural benefit is the massive part of this because it forces people to work outside of their disciplines and it forces people to think about the outcome as quickly as possible because there's a 5-day window turnaround. So actually the benefit we found was a cultural one. It starts to instill a way of thinking. And it was only when we've gone through this a few times and iterated it with our clients that actually we could even think about scaling this any further. So we did this as an experiment in itself. Can we do this and can we do things a bit better? And the answer was, yeah, we did do things a bit better. But the biggest answer was the cultural change in how we work day to day. And when you get really good, so I am a techie, and this to me is all like sort of second nature type stuff. This is just how software businesses have been building software for a while now. And it talks about things like agile and sprints and all of this stuff. Yeah, all sounds very complicated. The essence of it is still the same. You have to try and, if we're using that sort of Google Design Venture Sprint to create a culture of doing stuff quickly, to experiment and find what works, when you try to scale out, the thing that you're trying to do is just keep that pace. Yeah, but 5 days and full-time commitment is not possible in agency world because we just can't work like that, and clients don't want to pay for that level of engagement. So when we work now, we try to sort of work in the concept of longer-term sprints. So that might be a 4-week, 2 to 4 week engagement. But key is we have a clear vision. So we have the short-term view of what we're trying to achieve in a month, and then we have the longer-term view in terms of what needle we're trying to shift in a year period. And then all we're effectively doing is using this to balance the short-term immediacy of a sprint-based program with actually make sure that is delivering something that the organization values. So we're balancing the conflict of strategy with the ability to do and execute day to day. And that could be, your vision could be to break into global markets. The themes may be expansion into the US. An epic might be simply use content to raise the brand profile in the US. The stories might be build a content strategy or use an infographic, and then in the task level at the sprint, you might be building the infographic, but you're understanding everything that you do and how it lays up to the goal. So that's one of the techniques we started to use, working with clients in those sprint teams to deliver short-term, immediate stuff on a monthly cycle. The other thing that is the real hard part to manage is, especially in the client-agency relationship, and it goes to the point that Rob was making right at the start about things getting stayed, is how do you balance doing what you want as a client, which is the job you've asked us to do, as efficiently and as effective as possible, with as few muck-ups as possible as well. Do it well, do it high quality, do it repeatable. That is when you scale, yeah? So that's when you can standardize how you work and you don't want to fail, you want it to be highly reliable and you want the precision and output to be key. But how do you stop it getting stayed? You need to consider innovation. So the other aspect there is, well, innovation is all about being experimental, being challenging how you think. It's about failing as quickly as possible so you get the lessons learned, and it's about being fast, but also always questioning the norm. And without innovation, you're just going to get stayed and boring. So again, the thing that we have taken inspiration from in the software world is a concept called bimodal IT, and we've basically tried to take this principle of bimodal marketing, which is just 2 paces, basically. So you have the stuff that needs to be bulletproof, well-engineered, high quality, deliverable, and repeatable, and hits the KPIs and the service levels we have. And then you need another level of pace, which is where you experiment. And the balance is to have continuous experimentation and continuous high-quality deliverables going at the same time. And some of those things that you experiment may be things that you need to productionize and deliver and make more robust. So the key is making sure that you're working at these two levels of pace, but you're handing over key things at certain points in time for them to be productionized and made production ready. That is something that we're still very much a work in progress in trying to achieve, is balancing innovation and the demands that takes with the day-to-day stability and standardization activity. And it is a hard, ongoing challenge that we face day-to-day. I think the final thing is tech that we want to talk about. So if we've got ways of working with people and making sure they're T-shaped, got broad marketing knowledge, deep specialist knowledge, and we work well together, and we've got our processes to make sure that we can be fast, that we can innovate, that we can also do stuff without messing up too many times. The final thing is, how do we as an agency and how do we work with our clients on tech? So that infographic I showed you before, that little sort of sketch of the 5,000 to 7,500 vendors, that's all because they're delivering highly specialized capabilities that do a job well. But every time you buy one of those things, you have to integrate them and stitch them together to make them work together, because they are going to inform or impact the experience a customer has with your brand. So if they're all disconnected, it's going to be a disconnected experience. And there's this concept of a trade-off between the more specialized and the more vendors you partner with, the harder it is to integrate those things together and get value. But if you start to not adopt some of those specialist capabilities, you may be hamstrung and you might not be able to deliver the experiences that your client wants. So there's this constant trade-off. And what we do to try and balance this trade-off is we think there's 5,000 categories, 5,000 vendors, there's 70-odd categories of technology. But actually the important stuff for delivering experiences that are relevant and personalized to people on a consistent, repeatable basis starts with knowing them, which starts with data, and starts with the ability to turn those into useful information. And then when you've got that information, it allows you to make decisions. So how do we, what's the next best action we should take with this individual? And then the capability to orchestrate those decisions across channels, so recognizing that people go across all channels at any one point in time. You know, they could be on social, they could be on web, they could be on email, they could be having a phone call with a call center. So we focus effectively on developing those four foundational layers. So data, insights, decisions, and orchestration. And then we treat content as a key bit. So we need to link content to people at the right moment in time. And then we have a recognition of the concept of all the different channels and touch points. But the core of what we work with is around content and those capabilities from orchestration through to data. And then we recognize channels as areas in which you can go deep and highly specialized. But that's our way of dealing with complexity, is just trying to make it a little bit simpler to execute. And if we can do something with AI, all the better, because it'll help us ultimately be maybe a little bit more efficient and a little bit able to automate and take away some of the monotonous day-to-day stuff that machines are better at picking up from humans and allow us to be a lot more creative. So that's how we tried to frame our sort of architectural challenge.
So this has allowed us to be essentially a lot bolder about who we work with. Thank you. So to allow us to do that, we need clients who are kind of capable and have the authority to change processes, because we will be requiring our clients to work with us in a different way. And it only works if they buy into that. So we've kind of got to the point now where almost our qualification bit in the chemistry meetings is, you know, is the team that we're going to be working with able to basically create the change that we will require for us to be successful? And if it's not, we've actually started to rein back in and actually reduce the sort of the things that we're pitching and maybe us do individual projects. Because for us, we're going to be sat on a train, you know, with a 3-hour journey to Manchester, knowing that it's not delivered what we thought it really was going to deliver, and we don't want that to happen. So I've just had the note about how long's left, so I'm not going to go into these too much, other than hopefully you would back that some of the stuff we've said is true on Shell. So that's where Pierre-Louis from. If you want to talk, if you want to talk to us about some of the clients, that's fine. We're outside. What I thought would leave you on is just some of the things that we've learned, which might be useful with the relationships you have with your agencies and with your internal teams. So number one is just try new ways of working. So we had to do this because we had to be different. We had to demonstrate change. Encourage your agencies to do that. Give them the reins to do that. Talk to them about what that means and what you would need from them and vice versa. This one is so obvious. Embrace frequent FaceTime. But we still see this in some of our relationships. We end up hiding behind various different means of communication. And actually, the best way to come up with a new idea is to sit together, go down the pub, work out how to do something, go for a walk in the countryside. We actually hold strategy meetings with some of our clients in the country with boots on, walking across a muddy field. And it's amazing how that different kind of ideas come then. We work in a business in the kind of convenience fast food sector. So sort of flip the burgers, fill the photocopiers. So allow your agencies to come and do your job. Whatever it is that you do as a brand, get your agencies in to do it. And likewise, I would expect you guys to come to our place and do our job for a while, because then you understand each other a little bit better. Outcomes, not inputs. That for me is critical. What is it we're trying to measure? What are the things we're trying to move the dial on? What do you need to report to your boss for you guys to get your bonus? Let's work together to understand what that is. And also, we will be a lot more challenging than we used to be. Tell the truth. I don't know, thank you, how many times have you ever called up someone who lost a pitch and said, you came in a real close second? Like, we all know that's bullshit. Right? We sucked at something and you just didn't tell us what that was. Tell us what it is. Tell us what we need to get better on, because in doing so, you'll kind of elevate everyone around you. Establish those innovation budgets. So going back to one of the slides Gary was talking about the different paces that you need to work, kind of the bulletproof, repeatable stuff. There also needs to be something devoted to innovation, to strategy, to planning. Again, as an agency, it can be really frustrating to be told, we don't get any time from your kind of strategy team. We're not happy about that. It's like, well, that's a service that, we need to charge for and you need to pay for if that's what you would like. And mix up some fame and fortune, put some fun ideas in there. Marketing, we're lucky in the sense that compared to lots of industries, we have quite a decent amount of freedom to do some fun things. So let's make sure that we do that, because then that will inspire people to come and work in our industry and inspire us to bring in the best talent that we can. So that was a fairly non-offensive version of agency-client relationships. I will be in the bar afterwards, and we can go into a bit more detail. But thank you very much. Hopefully that was interesting, and hope you enjoyed your day.
We're quite up against time, but any questions from anyone for the guys? Because that was great.